Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dave Caldwell. I am with the Gippsland Ag Group. I'm also a beef and sheep producer based in East Gippsland. And our facilitator for today, we have the guest speaker of Nigel, Kerin, who shouldn't is probably a name that most of you have heard. He's a beef and wool, lamb, sheep, everything producer in Central West New South Wales. Firstly, I'd like to say thanks to the Gippy Ag Group. So there seems to be a lot of people jumping on that are relatively new to the concept. So we're a sort of research-based organisation based across Gippsland. So thanks for joining us. And obviously, from a sponsorship perspective, events like this wouldn't be possible without the help of the Drought node, so the Southeast Division of the Drought node and Food and Fibre Gippsland. So I might pass over to you, Nigel, if you're comfortable, just to introduce yourself and let us know. You've assured me you'll take 5 minutes, so I'll set a timer. A quick snapshot of what your business is, what you do, and how you do it, please, Nigel.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for giving your time, everybody. I'll see if I can give you an hour of your time where you don't feel you've been stolen from. Central West New South Wales, so you've got Dubbo, Orange, Parkes, Wellington. We're in about the middle of those four towns, close enough to it. 26-inch rainfall environment. Pretty much rains all year for us. We don't have a set period. It's 55, 60 mils a month is traditionally average, so I'd consider that easy to manage. We don't get the filthy cold of Orange, and we don't get the stinking heat of Dubbo, so I consider it a fairly soft environment. Yeovil has two soils. You've got the granites out one side, and then you've got the heavy red clay basalts out the other side. Yeovil is very dominated by livestock. Even though there's beautiful cropping soils, pretty much no one crops now. There was a big craze in the 90s when wool collapsed, but it very quickly went back to 100% livestock. And that was driven by economics, not so much personal choice or what you love doing. It was driven by economics. And if we go back 20 years ago in spring, you'd see yellow flower everywhere with canola, and now you might see 2 paddocks a year. So, so for me, the learning that come out of that was do what your district and your environment lets you do really well and as cheap as possible, but do what you love doing. And that's why we're very much livestock based. 2007 did succession, started off our business, me and Kate, Kerin Agriculture. And I guess we didn't start with that much as far as size, but every 3 years since 2007, we've brought another farm, and those have all been joining us. So out the side of town, I'm just going to get these people that we've got. Out the other side of town is a lot of small blocks, all soldier settlers blocks, most of them 640-acre blocks, and they've gone and brought one another out over the last 100 years, and we've just been gluing those blocks on as they become, as they come up for sale, and we've been lucky enough to keep joining blocks on to our main block, and we've now got 12,000 acres there. So we started with 1,200 in 2007, and there's 12,000 acres there. All of that, there's no old money, there's no off-farm income. Everything we invest in is on-farm and farm-driven, and very much about sheep production buys the farms. And one of the things we did do when we started our business was employed a business coach. And the reason we did that was I thought we were average farmers, but very, very much below average as far as financial literacy. And we had a lot of 1, 3, 5 and 10-year goals that our business coach literally forced us into developing. And when you haven't set goals that are dated, you've got something to work to. So those goals were they were stuck to the back of the dunny door, and every morning you used to look at them. And everything we wanted to achieve by 10 years, we'd done it by 6 and 7. And every decision we made when we met with our business coach was, if we go ahead and do this, does it lead us towards or away from where we want to be according to our goals? So our goals were mostly had to have finance to get them to where we wanted to be. So we had to get better at business, and we had to get better at grazing. But the biggest thing was financial literacy was the weak link in our business. So I guess now I find farming really, really easy, and I have done for probably the last 12 years, 15 years. Doesn't matter what's thrown at me now, I don't really give a bugger because we've been battle tested over the years. I'm 61 now, and I left school at 14, did year 9, and then went jackarooing. And when you've been in one game for that long with a pretty positive mindset, you get battle tested, and that just makes you stronger about how you run a business and how you build a business that fits in with climate's been our biggest victory, I believe. And that climate part, fitting in with climate, and you might think I'm as silly as a rabbit, but the biggest profit driver we've now got in our business is climate variability. If you're a stock trader, as in share trader, the last thing you want is a stable market, a flatline market. You want a market that's going up and down and up and down. So you're doing sell buys, and taking a bit of profit as you go along. Well, for me now, that is what we have to do in our business, in a livestock business, to actually take advantage of climate. So we developed a model from, say, 2007 onwards. But if we go back before 2007, it was a very, very boring, average business, stock standard, nothing special about what we did. It was 100% merino joined a merino business. Was it profitable? It made okay money in good years, broke even in the average years, and lost money in the not so average years. But having said that, if I had my old man's climate to manage now, which was very stable up until, say, 1985, I'd still manage things exactly how he was, and that was 100% breeding, because it was very consistent, but it was very lumpy income. And the lumpiness in the income is very hard to manage when you've got a business that's growing. So hence we went and introduced a trading operation into that to take advantage of climate more so than, very much about managing climate more so than managing cash flow. But what we found the benefits of becoming a good trader was consistency in cash flow. When you're 100% livestock, it's very lumpy. Sums of money come in over time. So that's where we're up to now. We only run 3 enterprises. Kerin Merino Studs, still the biggest money earner there, and by a long way. And everyone will say, what is your balance of breeding compared to trading? It started off with our sheep breeding business, used to pay its own direct costs and all the overheads of the business, and it did it easy. But as we've expanded, our overheads have got bigger and bigger, and now it's pretty much we've gone from about $1.4 million of overheads, and as we've grown, we're now sitting on about $3.3 million of overheads every year. So we introduced another seed stock business, which was a Wagyu seed stock business, and everything's been done with ET and AI and that. And it's only been going 2.5, 3 years. It won't have a break even till about the 5th or 6th year. So getting a seed stock business off the ground is very expensive when you're only dealing with top end genetics, and that's the only place you can really operate in that Wagyu game. You can have a very average breed of bull in any other breed that has a price associated with it, but in the Wagyu game, you have to have a certain set of data points for that bull to have any value at all. So that's marbling and eye muscle size and all that stuff, a lot of EBVs. And then we got cattle trading. We used to do a lot of sheep trading, but when you've got a business like Kerin that makes a fair bit of coin, if we trade sheep, we will end up with virulent foot rot. No buts about it. So we kick the sheep out. If the sheep trading is always more profitable than cattle trading, I can tell you that now. But we can't trade sheep when we've got a seed stock business that's which is laying all the golden eggs, as I call it, for the business. Because if you get virulent foot rot in the sheep stud game, you're dead overnight. So that's why we've kicked out sheep trading. I reckon I might
And
shut up now.
Nigel,
People
I'm
go.
going to I'm
Yeah,
going to
go.
throw a question to you, mate. I've heard in different parts of that I've heard you speak before. You say you can't buy preparedness. You have to build it. If you keep that in context, and I mean, as we spoke about yesterday, that Gippsland, for most intensive purposes, with it excluding a couple of little blips on the radar for the last couple of years, we've had a reasonably good run seasonally. What would What are three things that, sort of every Gippsland sheep producer should have in place before the next dry period? Like what are things that you've got in your business that you recommend to others when you look at that sort of preparedness? We've heard you just talk about trading and what that does, but outside of that, how do you manage a dry time, and what would you suggest to others to do to prepare?
Well, the first thing is don't do it when the business is under pressure.
Yep.
You always create change when the fish are jumping into the boat. And for me, the first thing now, and it's just a no-brainer, is containment. Containment feeding off sheep and cattle. And what we learned in 17, 18, 19 drought was the bit of grain they need. And we were only feeding no hay, no straw, nothing. We were feeding every morning at daylight, 7 days a week. And they were getting a total of 4.8 kilo of barley a week, nothing else. And what we learned in one period, they were in there for 9 months straight. And when that was going on, every day they were in containment, the wool check was paying for that containment feed. And that's the same with the dry pinch we're just been through now, which was only a little snap compared to those 3 years. But don't try and implement change when the business is under stress and you're already in a drought. Do it ahead of time, because you'll do a really good job at it. But the biggest thing, if you don't implement this stuff on farm and whack pens up, and they can be as crude as you want, just as long as they're there, you won't hesitate at going into containment. And you'll actually do it and make money. And where the money part comes from, if you look after your perennials and leave at least 800 or 1,000 kilos of dry matter litter, whatever it is, I don't care, just as long as it's there. If you can leave that on your farm, usually you will get storms and you will be able to hold that water on farm. And that'll keep your perennials alive if you go into a big extended dry that lasted for 3 years. I can remember doing a talk. My accountant come from Geelong, and he got me to do a talk at Hamilton. This would be 10 or 12 years ago, about building systems that deal with dry. And at that time, Hamilton or the Western Districts had never had a really good flogging with season, I reckon. And the thing I was told over and over again that day was, look, mate, it always rains here by the 14th of May. Well, it never rained from the day I left that motel for about 15 months. And you went back into that environment 12 months after I was there, and it was a moonscape, and everything was still running around the paddock. And I'll bet you, and I know this from what happened to our business in 1982, 83 drought, we lost at least 40% of the long-term carrying capacity of that farm, which was the old man's place, from leaving sheep out in the paddock and feeding them and just taking that top 25, 30 mils of topsoil off that farm. And guess what? That was 82, 83. You're now 40 odd years later, and the capacity of that farm hasn't been built back up since then. And the reason you can judge that is look at the amount of bales of wool that were coming off then to what there was, say, 10 years ago. Look at the amount of DSEs a hectare it's running now, or 10 years ago, compared to 40 years ago. And I was part of that. I was feeding sheep and working for the old man, didn't know any better. There was no such thing as containment feeding. But Jesus, it costs you some money leaving animals out in the paddock. You just crucify your cash flow and you return to profit when it does rain. Your water use efficiency is shit if you leave them walking around. And the perennials you did have won't be there to help you rebuild your business or your balance sheet again. So do whatever you can. Like To build containment yards costs bugger all compared to going and buying a small piece of machinery, compared to going and buying a side-by-side. You'll build containment pens to hold 7,000 sheep for the price of a Honda 1000 side-by-side. Easy. And
Yes, and in terms of design, I think we spoke about this briefly. Like the design's important to the individual farm, I suppose, but the
yeah,
concept of having that asset there is more important than the design. And often, as
yeah,
producers, we get hung up on how, which way the gate's going to go, or are we having a laneway here or there?
yeah.
But from what I understand, you're fundamentally saying just don't get hung up on that. Like just actually have something that allows you to make a decision when the time's right rather than after the time was right. Is that sort of a bit of
And
a
if you start thinking about your containment yards now and you don't do anything for at least another 6 months, the amount of changes you'll come up with and redraw, and it should be all about labour efficiency and time. So don't jump out of bed tomorrow morning and go and build containment if you haven't thought about it. Start writing stuff down on a bit of paper, drawing it, and then go, if you're like me, you'll look at it in another 4 weeks and go, that is the dumbest thing I've done because this won't work. You won't get stock flow. And the way we did it was what's called, I call a skip pen system. We had about, oh God, there was 9,500 ewes there on feed. The first pen of a morning's empty and it's got C-section, 300mm C-section just laid out on the ground. You drive straight over it, drop the required amount of kilos in it, go to the gate, open it, let them all in there, no dog required. You drive into where they were, run the grain out, go to the next pen, let them in. That is so cheap and simple to make because we already had the little paddocks there, little Holden paddocks beside the wool shed. All we had to buy was the 300mm purling to dump it on the ground. And you must get it off the ground so the wind blows underneath it. If you dump it on flat ground, the wind hits it and fills it up every day with crap, which is basically sheep shit.
yeah.
Even if it's only 75mm off the ground, it'll work. You won't get sheep shit blow into it from the wind.
So if you say for example we've invested in that infrastructure to be able to make the decision, and a dry time's come. Can you talk? I've heard you talk in other spaces a little bit about, how that delivers value when it does rain. Like it's obviously got a purpose to maintain things and not drive your country back into the ground. Can you just talk briefly about what you see as the value when the recovery is required and how that impacts the way you think and the timing of some of the actions you take?
So it's not as if we've only had one or two rodeos. We've had a lot of dry pinches. And all I see is when we're buying and restocking, bringing cattle back in, our neighbours are still feeding that didn't do containment. And most of those neighbours still don't do containment. And that's the secret. Your buy price, if you're buying animals and coming back in, you're buying when most people are still feeding. So they're at a discount. And that discount is from just going into containment early. So when it does rain, you get an immediate response because you haven't denuded that landscape or lost perenniality. And the other thing, one of your things with drought preparedness is you make money while you're in drought because you normally you're selling down stock as time goes on, you're selling down. And I think if we take 23 out of the equation, that was a massive hangover. We lost 74% of the value of sheep and cattle, mutton, lamb, beef in 4 months. But what goes on now, usually in the dry periods, animals in good condition, sheep or cattle, are worth a bloody fortune. So we were funding that 3-year drought through the sale of surplus ewes, older ewes, stud ewes we kicked out of the stud. And I remember there was 2B doubles went out of there 1 week of sheep that come back at $283 average. They got their heads cut off.
Yeah.
So what's changed is, for me, and this is the curly-haired kid in agriculture for the last 30 years in Australia has been grain growing. As far
Yep.
as I'm concerned, they've had their day in the sun. And now for me, the next boom in agriculture in Australia is sheep and cattle, because we're not affected so much by these massive cost of productions of spare parts, machinery. We have infrastructure costs, but we usually buy them once in a lifetime. We buy one wool shed, one set of cattle yards, one set of sheep yards in a lifetime. So for me, it's the livestock industry now that's going to be the shining light in Australian ag, not the grain growing, because those costs now are out of our control, especially with machinery replacement. But if I look at the world economies are changing, the world populations are changing, and we're losing more and more ground to livestock every day and cropping. If you look at Texas, it loses 1,000 acres a day to urban sprawl. And,
Yeah, it's unreal.
and Texas is the biggest cow herd in America. It's in Texas. So see how there's a lot of things just keep leaning. And here's one where I disagree with all the analysts. They all say there's going to be a rebuild happening with sheep and cattle. You're dreaming. As soon as we look like coming back into a rebuild, either Victoria goes into a drought, Tassie, or South Australia, or New South Wales and Southern Queensland. And I reckon cow numbers are going to stay stable because climate's not going to allow you to rebuild those cow numbers. So we're not going to go back to the big historic cow numbers. We're not going to go back to those massive historic ewe numbers, because you think we can do it. We can breed up sheep overnight. But somewhere on the East Coast, it's going to get flogged by a dry, which stops that happening. And if you look at all the ewes that come onto the market in the last 12, 15 months, that was part of the hangover from 2023, because the cockies that were selling those ewes at a good price for mutton, the reason they were being sold was to get cash flow going that didn't happen in their business when they come out of the 23-24 financial year into 24-25. And if you look at the Victorians, they come out of and Tassie and South Australia, they come out of 23-24 and went straight into an extended 15-month dry period. Now, you blokes might have missed it, but most of Victoria, Tassie and South Australia copped it. So there's a massive push to create cash flow in them as businesses, so they sold. But where I want to go to as far as that preparedness, have a facility set up to use to purchase livestock, and have it set up while you're still in drought. Because if you're going to wait till it rains and go and set up finance, guess what's going to happen? You'll miss the early bird that gets the worms. And for me, we don't have a problem borrowing money to buy a bloody $130,000 Land Cruiser car. We don't have any trouble going borrowing $500,000 on a tractor. Well, they're all depreciating liabilities. Livestock aren't. They're appreciating assets that you can make money out of with very little expenditure. The thing is, if you look at the cropping game, you don't just buy the tractor, you keep pulling the checkbook out to pay for the inputs. And I'm going, if you want to recover back quickly, cash flow wise, there's nothing beats livestock, and especially sheep, because their reproduction's 5 months.
Yep.
And then 3 months, 4 months after they're born, you can put them back into the restockers game via Auctions Plus, or however you want to do it, where they're now worth a fortune. And it's climate that's driving that fortune, why sheep and cattle are worth so much. It's not markets. It's supply and demand. So the quicker you get your head around that, it's very hard to make money unless you have access to finance.
So if I try and summarise that a little bit for you, Nigel, we've got this, go and invest and set up the infrastructure to be able to utilise the opportunity. Within that infrastructure, obviously, it would also include facilities. So, things like a line of credit, or however you're going to fund, or whether you've got an available cash account that's used for trading your way back in. One of the questions we've had from one of the participants is around, if you've got the infrastructure and you've got the capacity to trade, is there any rule of thumb that you use in terms of, do you do you store X amount of days worth of grain on farm or fodder, or, do you have some kind of methodology that you use relative to your stocking rate, your infrastructure, and then your desired outcome? Or how do you approach that physical feed demand when you go into containment, I suppose, is the question.
Right. There's two parts that if our business had the capacity to say to run 10,000 ewes, 5,000 ewes, whatever the land size was, I wouldn't have a problem now being 100% breeding, sheep or cattle, because it's not like it was back in previous droughts where we got into a drought and they were worth nothing. So when I look at how easy and cheap it is to feed sheep and how quick you can recover financially after a drought, maybe where you live, trading's out of the question. And for me, I don't have a problem with that, because things have changed now where actually feeding livestock, I can't see how you're going to go wrong. Bugger if I can. And I'd be happy now to feed, if we were 100% breeding, I'd have no trouble. I'd probably take 20, 25% of the ewes out straight away. And then I'd just buckle down and feed the whole lot. And if it's 12 months, big deal.
In
Because
terms of, have you got procured grain sitting there, or how do you actually implement that part of the process, I suppose, was more my question.
We went from being the biggest hay producers in the district to zero. I have no grain on farm, no silage and no hay. The question you want to ask is, why would you do that? Now, there is zero intelligence needed in plugging an auger into a silo, but there's a lot of intelligence needed to play the game of chess, which I don't know how to play chess, but I look at playing chess like playing the game of agriculture. My business needs cash flow. And the reason it needs cash flow is it's fairly well leveraged. We get to 60% equity and we go and buy another farm. That usually happens every 3 years. We might drop back to 40, 45, 50. So what's important for me is cash flow. And our business is a bit different to most, but that's what's got us ahead. So I have nothing stored on farm. And do you know what for the size of our farm, I'll give you an idea. In October this year, we had 72,000 DSCs on. By the time we got to February, we had 14,400 DSCs on. But that was a destock, not forced so much by drought. The destock was created from taking forward positions, supplying cattle back into feedlots at a date. So we were naturally destocking on a contract back into feedlots. But I just think you can't stay rigid. You've got to stay agile in the way you look at things. Like, I'm not locked into anything. We can run this webinar in 2 years' time and you'll hear a different story. You've got to stay really flexible. Agile, not fragile. And for me, it's about looking at your business. And a really good one-liner I heard was, you can't trip a centipede. And if you look at your business, a centipede's got boots all over him, right? Legs everywhere. It's impossible to trip a centipede. And if you look at the anxiety points in your business that create anxiety, if you keep rectifying them and fixing them, and you just keep working on fixing those things that create anxiety in your business, guess what? That's where that one-liner comes from. You can't trip a centipede. And for me, it's constantly trying to fit in with climate. And I think the one thing the Mediterranean climate people have, which is mostly southern New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, WA, you can pretty much I don't know about the Gippsland, but you can pretty much rely on bugger all rain over summer. So that takes 4 months out of the year that you don't really have to manage, because you know you're getting bugger all. So just to reiterate, no, we store nothing. But my average feed bill, this is a funny thing, my average feed bill rolling over 10 years is 80 grand a year. It's a rolling average what we spend on fodder, which is bloody nothing for the amount of DSCs we got.
Yes. Yep. So you've got no stored, you've obviously got access or feel comfortable enough that you can access fodder
Yeah,
and
easy. One
feed.
phone call.
One phone call, right?
One
Yeah. So
phone
you've
call.
got that. So, but you must have a pre-existing relationship somewhere in that space to be that comfortable, or do you?
They're all
Is
ran by clients that have sheep wheat
yeah,
operations,
yeah.
sheep
Which
barley.
is obviously, I mean, in the seed stock business that you're in, that gives you a lot of contacts. What would you propose to people who don't have that? Not a luxury because you've earned it, but that position in their business where it's easily accessible. Is it?
Oh, just use your local broker, grain
Yeah,
broker.
yeah,
Those blokes, as soon as you ring them, they know the price, can tell you the price straight away, can tell you where you're going to get it from, organise the freight, tell you what the freight's going to cost you, what it's going to cost a tonne land at your farm.
yeah.
Brokers are good.
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I've got a background in the commodity game, so I understand how that works in that part of the world. And for anyone on this, I mean, it probably doesn't operate as freely because there's not as much grain produced in Gippsland, but it is all still very accessible. Like there are a number of local
Yeah.
feed supply companies that act effectively as the broker in essence, if you're buying grain, and in the fodder space, you're seeing more and more of that. Um, so I suppose we've got the infrastructure, we've got the access to feed. What is it that you use? And you mentioned some dry matter numbers earlier. What's your trigger to utilise those assets? So at what point does Nigel Kerin get off his exercise bike and say, "Hey, look, we've got to we've got to put some in or all in," or what are the metrics that you use to establish that sort of decision?
When we're in the growing season, we're doing feed budgets a bit like a dairy farm every 10 days because that's our grass bank. So we work out how many kilos a day we're growing, how many kilos a day we're consuming based on the DSEs we're running, how many days you've actually of grass you've got in the grass bank, and then how the DSE is going to increase or decrease into the future. The other thing we implemented, I'd say 7 years ago, we put a lot of moisture probes in 1.5 meters down. Them things are so bloody accurate. They are a major part of decision making because if we get to the 14th of August and we've only got 30 days of available water, and it'll tell you how many days you've got left till you've got zero water in your profile. And they're accurate. That's a lot about how we make decisions. And that'll be if we're going to sell early, sell little, sell high, sell late, sell lots, sell low. And that's been proven over and over and over again. The
Sorry, can
first,
you just run that? Can you just run that cell? Run that
if
past
you
me. Sorry.
sell early, sell high. Sorry, what is it? Sell early, sell little, sell high, sell late, sell lots, sell low.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you're coming into the market and you've held off and held off and held off for 3 months and it still hasn't rained, you're going to be selling when everyone else is also there. And the reason why you're selling, no one had any guardrails or rules of engagement on how big or how small the grass bank was.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny? We make our money out of grass. We might know what's in our money bank, but we don't know how much is in the grass bank.
Grass bank. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to know that?
So when I tied to the ABC, so we can do as much sponsorship and advertising as we like. What sort of probes have you got,
Um,
Nigel? It's just a question that I
Porosity. We've
can
used two
answer.
different probes. Porosity is the one we use. Good backup. Good. Nothing much goes wrong, and if something does go wrong, they come and fix it.
Yep.
Usually at their expense. So
Yep.
Porosity is the one we use. They're a good. There was another company and they were terrible.
Yep. Now, there's been a bit of talk about stocking rate. What sort of stocking rate does your district? What's your district average? And I suppose why I'm asking is that I feel in this part of the world, a lot of us have a grasp on how many head we have, but probably don't do a good enough job of translating that to DSE, like how many DSE they're carrying. Um, can you sort of maybe explain about how understanding your DSE has helped shape your management, if that makes sense? So
Yeah,
understanding that stocking rate properly, can you just, so I suppose walk us through if Nigel Kerin class 101 of stocking rate, what do you what do you use in your business as the triggers?
we have been using grazing charts for probably 25 years. So we have 5 grazing charts for 5 different properties. and then we amalgamate them into one grazing chart for the whole operation. And all we're looking at is the trend line. So I'll pretty much know 3 months before anyone else when the shit's going to hit the fan. And I've got 3 months in conjunction with the water probes to make up my mind how we're going to play the game. And I'm always now a seller. I never ever thinking of not selling, because every time I procrastinate. So what you do with grazing charts is you just say, well, if I destock, I'll get the trend lines going like this, which means we've got more animals than we've got grass. All I want to do is flat line in the first month. After 3 months of a line going up, I want to flat line that line. And I might only have to sell 800 DCs or 300 or 400, something like that. And then you do the next month. Did it go up? Did it stay flat line or a fall? And I just keep adjusting stock and rate to carrying capacity based on the trend line. Grass budgets come into it, because in a breeding operation, you must keep at least 120 days of grass in front of a breeding operation. If you narrow that down to 60 days or 30 days, you can't react quick enough. So if your golden rule is, for my breeding cows or my ewes, I'm going to have 120 days of grass in front of them all the time, guess what happens? All the good things happen. And what I mean by good things is condition score of ewes, cows, condition score of heifers returning to second joining will be right up in the top, because condition score is driven by grass. So for me, it's about having that grass budget there and always having that feed in front of those breeding animals. Your worm burden basically disappears because you're not eating close to the ground. There's so many good things. You get a high fetus count. You get a high conception count. There's nothing good about bringing your grass budget down to 30 or 60 days, because you'll find it hard to keep condition on your breeding animals, which will influence, especially in sheep, fetus count and repro and weaning rates. And also, if you're going to graze hard and often with very little recovery, you're going to end up eventually eating nothing but worm eggs. And that applies to cattle too. And through the use of OptiWay, we've found cattle worm burdens are a lot bigger thing than we thought they were. We would never have known we were affected by cattle worm eggs the way we were until we actually started using OptiWay. And they can crash weight gain in a matter of 7 to 10 days, from doing really good weight gain to losing weight just from worms.
So we've got this containment set up. We've got the facility available. We're fed through a dry time. We're in a slightly better position than they're looking on the other side of the fence, because we've pulled the early trigger, not the late one. When you talk about trading as part of your recovery strategy or your pasture utilization strategy, whichever one you want to put that in, what are the things that you're looking for in a trade? Like I ask this question I suppose from a personal standpoint, that in our business it's taken us a while, that you sort of naturally, if you're a breeding business and a trading business, you're naturally inclined to try and trade something similar to what you breed. But can you run the group through how you come about what you're trading and what you're doing? Now, you mentioned sheep probably have drifted out of your trading setup from a biosecurity type thing, but can you just run how Kerin Ag approaches that recovery phase and how you trade, the early trade? What are you looking for and how are you doing it?
Here's one your father should have probably told you, and mine certainly didn't tell me, and we should all know this. When you're in the finishing game, a kilo of red meat is 74% water. So if you're laying down red meat, it's cheap to lay down because it's mostly water. And if you're starting to lay down fat on lambs or cattle, and especially cattle because it's really easy to see, you'll see where the tail goes into the butt of the beast, you'll start getting that build up of fat around each side of the tail. What you've got to realise with fat, there's 7 times more megajoules of energy and protein to lay a kilo of fat down than what there is a kilo of red meat. So if you're laying fat down you're doing the feedlotter's job. Feedlotters love feeding fat cattle because they've laid the fat down at a massive cost. So what we're after is little as animals as we can possibly buy, as in weaners, calves, right down to 150 kilo, up to a max 280, 270. I'd rather have a max of 250. And all we want to do is grow them animals out and get them to about, we used to grow them right out to 500 odd kilo entry weight into a feedlot. And we worked out we were killing stocking rate because the amount of grass they need to lay down fat compared to red meat is horrendous. And if you're mapping your DSE ratings and looking at consumption, someone's stealing your grass every day and you're wondering where it's going. It's in these animals that are laying down fat. So if you look at the blokes in the export lamb game, they're laying fat down, especially in the crossies. And it's cost them a fortune. And my thing is, don't go for the big, record price of Bendigo with your lambs. Go for where the profit is and the stocking rate is. Go for where the high stocking rate is. Because if you're laying fat down on lambs, it's costing you a bloody fortune, the same as cattle. So for us, we buy very, very small animals. We buy as many hooves as we can with the least amount of money we can. And this Friday, we'll be finished our restock and we'll be pretty much fully restocked. And that's taken 6 weeks. And what I pay for them doesn't really matter too much. It's what I can forward sell them for. So that creates, the forward sell creates the buy price of what you can actually buy. Just give me the question again.
No, I was trying to understand, which I think you've sort of covered, what it is that you
I
trade
sort of
into
covered it.
there.
I just let you know that don't get hung up on this. The agent, and agents are pricks at this, absolute pricks. And you know why? They'll come onto your farm and say, oh, they're nearly ready. Just, especially with lambs, listen, just put a few feeders out there in that paddock of lucerne. If I owned these, I'd leave them on that, beautiful steers. I'd just leave them on this oats another 4 or 5, 6 weeks and lay down fat. Well, that's all right if you're processing them. But if you're in a restocker going back into feedlots, don't do it because it's killing your stocking rate because you put it laying fat down, not red meat. And agents want you to hold them animals as long as you can so that they get the dearest price they can get to get the highest commission. They don't care about your business so much. All they care about is your commission. Now, I've got a very, very good relationship with my agent, but that's the rules you have to establish. We're not here to be a feedlot on grass. We're here to make money, not friends. And agents want you to hold animals as long as you can so they get the biggest amount of commission out of you. And that, not all of them, but the biggest percentage because they're feathering their own nests.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's how they're incentivized, I suppose.
But it doesn't help your business.
If I look
I just
at
want to
your
finish
business,
one. I just want to finish one thing.
Yep.
So before we learned how to grass budget properly, we were growing background to cattle right out 500 odd kilo and laying down fat. We don't even think of that. As soon as we get them, if we're buying small cattle now, lightweights, we get them to about 380 kilo. And as soon as we think they're starting to slow down, lay down fat, bang, they're gone. And that now, we know exactly when that's happening now over the last 7 years of using Optiway because we've got that experience of knowing when things change, where they go from laying down muscle to fat, because your weight gain per day will suddenly drop off. They can't. And here's the thing. If you want to know when it's happening, when they were laying down red meat, they're back on the camp at 8:15 in the morning. When they're laying down fat on the same feed, they're still eating at 10 o'clock. That's the biggest giveaway on good feed. Everything's right. Worm burden's right. You're in good feed. It's got a fair bit of legume in it. Can be a heap of grasses. If they're back on the camp real early in the morning, 8:15, at the moment, all our sheep and cattle are back on the camp at 10 to 8. You're laying down red meat. If they're still walking around in bloody good feed, and it's good feed, and there's plenty of kilos there, and they're still walking around at 10 o'clock, they're starting to lay down fat. because they've got to eat twice the megajoules to lay down fat. And I don't know if any of you have been overweight, but and I know from my experience, the easiest way to get overweight is to eat too much, right? So I'm still walking around at 1 o'clock. I haven't gone back to camp. I'm still eating. But I know when I lost 30 odd kilo once, and it's a completely different mindset, and cattle and sheep are the same. You just don't simply eat as much to lay down red meat. But geez, laying down fat's expensive. So I just wanted to explain that one.
Yeah, that's understandable. And so, I mean, one of the things in the way you've built your business, a lot of that talk is related to, your forward selling at the same point that you're buying. Now, obviously, you must volume must help you in that space. One, from established relationships, two, the capacity to guarantee delivery, or if you're buying 1,000 head of cattle, are you forward selling 1,000 head of cattle, or are you forward selling 950? Or one of the challenge in Gippsland, we've got producers of varying different range in terms of size, scale, and how they operate. And so I suppose a question to you that might help some in the group who say, I can't do that because I don't have the scale, or I can't do that because I don't have the relationship. What are the things that you would say in that space to try and make it achievable for for as many as possible?
Nothing to do with scale. Nothing to do with scale. It's more about how good you are at delivering a product at a certain weight on a certain date, and never going back on your contract, or never going back on your word, never pulling out of a contract. And I've never, ever done that. I get a contract, I'm happy with it, been doing it for a long time now, and I don't care what the noise is in the market. I don't give a shit what's happening in the market, because they're locked away. They're right. What I do care about is weight gain and monitoring that. And we've now got, there's another Optiway on the way. We've now got 7 Optiways, sheep and cattle. We need to have them there. And that's what taught us to get really, really good, no matter what type of grass, no matter what type of season we're on. It also taught us the rewards to use and loosely urea-based feed additives in the dry months when it hays off, be that winter or summer, and how we can turn 700 grams a day of weight gain into 1.1 on fairly ordinary tucker just from using a urea-based loose leaf. And that keeps us, guarantees us of filling our contracts that we've got to go back into.
Yeah.
One of the big things that dictates what we do is labour. If it's complicated with heap of labour attached to it, I tend to steer away from it. And that doesn't mean I steer away from sheep. If I was trading sheep, say there's people on here that have got a cattle operation and no sheep, well, I'd trade sheep, providing you like sheep. But the thing is, I'd always buy shorn lambs. I'll pay an extra $5 or $7 for a shorn lamb. So the labour component at home, I don't have to do that.
Yep.
And usually I'll turn those lambs over before they need bunging. So there's no pushing dags and shit off them. But that's just something you take into consideration, no matter whether you're a small operation or a big operation. You need to have the time to be a manager or the CEO of the business. And you've got to think about, how do I set this farm up that allows me enough time to focus on where the low-hanging fruit is in the industry at the moment.
Yep.
And that, to me, one of the lowest hanging fruit is in the sheep game, is always high conception, high feeders count, which is driven by managing your pastures and driven by very, very good management. See, my thing with good management and shit management, they both cost the same. I can have the best manager in the world. It costs the same as the worst manager in the world as far as wage. You can have a shitty one on 130 grand. You can have a cracker on 130 grand. Might be 100 grand, might be 80, whatever it is. But it's management and having the time to manage that drives turnover. And I think turnover should be always measured by turnover should always be, scale should always be measured by turnover, not hectares. So that's my opinion.
And why so? Can you explain that just in a little bit more
Well, I
detail?
can tell you now that I consider the more enterprises you have on the farm, the least profitable it's going to be. And I know myself, I can't run 3, 4, 5 enterprises because I can't run any of them in the top 10% where I need to be because I'm stretched so thin mentally managing 3, 4, 5 enterprises. And for me, 2 enterprises, that's all you need. Just as long as they're suited to the environment you live in and you love doing it, you're like a dog rolling in sheep guts doing it. You love it.
Yep.
But what I see is enterprise. I tell you, the killer in the sheep game is, oh, well, I got Merinos joining Merinos, and then I joined some of them coal Merinos to a Dorset, and then I joined some of them, oh, we get a good price for our first cross ewes at Bendigo. So then I'll say, can you tell me which is your most profitable enterprise? And then you get the 4-second pause, which tells you they haven't got a freaking clue. None of those enterprises are at scale. None of them.
Yep.
One breed of sheep, do what you want with it. I don't care which one it is, but just one breed of sheep that's modern. And modern simply means it's got growth and fertility at its focus. And we sold wool 2 weeks ago. We do sheep and do it very well. Those ewes cut 8.24 kilos. They were 19.1 micron and come back at $118 a head. But in that, they were shorn 11 months. In that fleece, they raised and weaned 142% of lambs. Why? And then we scanned 3 or 4 weeks ago, the same ewes scanned this year at 193% fetuses to ewes scanned in lamb. See how that focus on fertility and high conception and high fetus counts, that is a focused thing we do. And if you are doing 3 and 4, 5 different enterprises, that attention to detail isn't there to catch that low-hanging fruit, which is driven by fertility. And if you're a cattle cocky, you'll always get your heifers in calf the first year. It's that next year you need to be on the ball. And it's doing those grass budgets and having that grass inventory worked out, and you'll work it out over a few years. How many days of grass have you got on hand right now? If I can ask you that and you can tell me exactly, I know you got your head around it and you're starting to manage the grass bank, because you don't have to worry about your money bank if you don't know what's in your grass bank, because they'll both eventually run out of liquidity.
Yep. So, guys, we've got another sort of 5 or 7 minutes. If anyone from the floor's got any questions, feel free to drop them in the box, and we'll see what we can do. Nigel, you've talked a bit about where your pasture-based system and how you've given us some triggers about entering into containment. How do you think about it, like in terms of protecting your pasture base, and how do you do that while sort of maintaining cash flow and business viability, and what it means when it does rain? Because I think that's the one thing that often doesn't get calculated in when you do a containment feeding exercise. Probably that we're all are automatically drawn to the cost of the infrastructure, or the cost of the daily cost or the weekly cost or the total cost of feed, but we don't often have a grasp on those other costs that we get, or the gains that we'll have in our pasture. So can you just talk briefly, and we've only got a couple of minutes, but it's probably a pretty long question, but about how you look at your ground cover and protecting that perenniality in your business and what it means for you?
Of when you measure things, like measure kilos grass per hectare, what are we growing at any given season? And you're whinging about the cost of fert, so single super, urea, Gran Am, whatever, MAP, DAP, blah, blah, blah. You can spread as much fert as you want to, but nothing will grow grass like grass. Grass grows grass. And for me now, I'm even more, I guess you could say, super duper confident that I can't lose money going into container. It's a win-win situation. Because if you've done it enough and measured the growth that happens, and you don't mind jumping over a fence and measuring across the boundary fence the growth after it breaks, guess what the difference is? There's about, to what I've worked out over the last 15 years, the difference in the speed of recovery of the grass is about 115% different over all different pastures. Where you'll jump the fence, you don't even have to jump it. You can bloody measure your neighbour's grass just through the fence. If you know how he run it, and then you say, well, I'm growing 23 kilos a day at the moment, and then through the fence it's growing about 12. Why? No difference, same rainfall. The rain didn't stop on top of the barb. It's the speed of recovery back into cash flow that you've got to look at. And I do this not storing any fodder. So it's not as if I've got it all right. Most people would like to store in breeding operations 12 months. I don't have an issue with that, but it's not what I want for my business because I have commitments that I have to commit to. And one of the commitments we have is a really healthy principal payment, which was yesterday, last day of the financial year. If you commit to paying principal, you become a better grass manager because grass drives what profit you're going to have. The more grass you got, the more animals you got, the more stocking rate you got. Stocking rate is one of the major drivers of profit. And for me, if you look at the local lad, is it Bairnsdale or Barnsdale? Which one is it? Bairnsdale?
Oh, you do you, Nigel. I'm so Bairnsdale, mate, but
Bairnsdale, right? If
you're
you
from
look at
Yeovil or
young,
Yeovil?
yeah, Yeovil.
Yeah.
If you look at the young bloke that was born and bred at Bairnsdale that now is playing for the #1 AFL side in Victoria and he's getting paid $1 million a year. And then you got the other bloke who drinks half a carton of grog on a Friday night and then has a bottle of rum and 2 packets of Winnie Reds and then turns up on Saturday morning to play AFL for the local side. You've got an amateur athlete and a professional athlete. What's the difference between the two? One gets paid a shitload and the other one gets paid nothing. But what does the one that gets paid a shitload have? He has a team behind him, coaches, physios, dietitians, mindset coaches, and all that sort of stuff. Well, the stuff I'm doing and done for years now is just the grass management stuff. How much are we growing? What are we growing? If I use a urea Grand Am blend right now in winter, how much growth am I going to get? What will be the return? Is it 3.5 to 1, 4 to 1, or 5 to 1? So I did budgets last week on 66% urea, 33% Grand Am. It's going to cost me about $860, and I've got about a free with spreading that on fescue pastures to really get them humming in winter. It's got about a $3.50 return for every dollar spent. So we go ahead and do it.
Yep.
But for me, the difference between a professional athlete and an amateur, one gets paid a shitload, another one doesn't. And that's my view on managing grass and knowing my grass bank. One's a professional footy player, another one's an amateur. One makes a lot of money and one doesn't. And my thing is, here's the gold. What does it cost you to learn that skill set? Nothing. Zero. A carton of beer to your local dairy farmer every second or third Saturday morning to teach you. And you blokes are surrounded by dairy farmers. It used to be. Yeah. Might still be. But the thing is, learn it. And it costs you nothing. And it produces hundreds of thousands of dollars extra income at zero cost. A few cartons of beer. So see why I love the livestock game. The livestock game produces the cash, that gives you the cash flow, that gives you the profit, that allows you to invest in an appreciating asset, not depreciating liabilities. And that's how we've grown our business over the years, all been done with livestock. But we know what's in the money bank and in the grass bank all the time.
Yep. Well, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you, Nigel. There's a fair bit to chew on, but what's comforting is that all of it, I would say, nothing you've mentioned today is unachievable, which is something I always like coming away from these sorts of things on, is something that hopefully you can all look at and say, I can make a change in my business that's come about because of a thought from today. I'm going to give it a bit of a plug. We've got at Gippy Ag, we've got a Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. It's a podcast. I'd highly recommend that you jump on that. Jump on the website. There's a number of different soil probes that obviously Nigel's mentioned some soil probes. There is a couple of different soil probe projects going on in the district. So I'd say jump on that. There's a heap of resources on the Gippy Ag website that would encourage you to get along to. For those of you who signed up today, we will be starting a WhatsApp prior to the next meeting, which is on Wednesday, the 15th, between 1 and 2. Nigel, you might want to put that one in your diary. And basically that WhatsApp will be around if between now and then, if you've got any questions that pop into your mind on some of the thoughts of what's been discussed today, that we collate them. There's no such thing as a dumb question, so please feel free to reach out if you're not comfortable on that. Send an email or drop a text. I know I'm not sure how easy it is to do a virtual clap, but I will ask everyone to put their hands together for Nigel. Nigel, we appreciate your insights and your capacity to share what you've learnt on your journey. And I would say thank you to those sponsors, and we look forward to catching up in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you, Nigel. We shall be in touch.
Is there any burning questions there? Just unmute yourself and ask them if you wish.
We haven't got any more in the
chat box.
the chat box, but hang on. Oh no, sorry, a whole other one's just popped up. Oh no, there we go. No, so look, we'll bring those questions to the next session, and we shall see you all in a couple of weeks' time. So thanks all for attending.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got one real quick one, Nige. You said at the start that you got out of trading lambs and sheep due to bringing in foot rot to your current herd. If you had a separate property that was separate from your breeding herd, would you relook at doing that or not?
Yes. Yeah, no problem. The problem is all our country joins.
Yeah, so I've got two properties that, with kilometres between them. So we got our breeding herd at one, and we've got our feedlot at the other that we bring stores into.
No worries. Not an issue.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye now.